Cousin falsely accused me of SA. Now my family is contacting me after almost 10 years. I grew up in what was probably the most normal of households. My parents worked a lot but still managed to care for me and my 3 older sisters. We were never super close as a family, but we never had any issues either. The same goes for my extended family. They always lived a few hours away, but we saw each other during summer holidays or Christmas and always got along great. However, as we got older, we naturally grew apart as everyone had their own lives. I'm 31 now. In 2014, when I was 22 and attending university, I received a phone call from my mother that turned my life upside down. I remember I didn't even answer at first because I was gaming with friends. However, she called again immediately after the first call. This was an unwritten rule in the family. If you call twice like that, it's important, like someone died important. So when she called again, I excused myself and answered, only to hear chaos on the other end, like people were arguing. But when my mom realized I had answered, it sounded like she went to another room and closed the door. I just asked what was going on, and I heard her crying. My memory of this conversation is a bit blurry, but she basically asked me if I had something to confess regarding Eve. Eve is my cousin on my mom's side and is 7 years younger than me, 15 at the time. At that point, I hadn't even seen Eve for several years. I just said no and asked what this was about. She just cried even harder and started accusing me of inappropriately touching Eve back when we were children. Eve had supposedly told everything to my sister, and my sister had relayed the information to my mother and my aunt. According to Eve, when she was 9, and I was 16, she had been playing in my room when I came in and started feeling her up. My mother screamed at me to say something, but I couldn't even speak. It was all so absurd. I remember thinking that it must be some bad joke. The last thing I remember saying was that it's not true and that Eve is lying. But then my mom goes on saying that Eve gave such a detailed description of where and how. Then she kept asking something like, "Did you do this? Did you do this?" And I just screamed back at her and denied it each time. It all ended with my mom putting me on speaker, and both my mom and dad said that they don't want anything to do with me and never to contact them again. 2 of my sisters texted me later that day, pretty much saying that I'm disgusting and then blocked me. I know it's weird, but after that call, I went to have a long shower. To this day, I still don't know why I did that. After calming down, I started calling and texting everyone, even Eve. No one answered, and the ones who hadn't blocked my number by then quickly did so. The only thing I heard back was from my father, who texted me to stop contacting them and that they need to heal. That was 9 years ago, and I haven't spoken to anyone in my family since that day. To say this messed me up is an understatement. I was living in a haze for weeks after that and hardly ate at all. It didn't help that this was right before I was supposed to defend my bachelor's thesis and was already stressed out. Luckily, my co-writer sensed something was up and saved me by controlling the conversation so that I got the easy parts. Without him, I'm sure I would have failed. Needless to say, no one came to my graduation. Then started the worst period of my life. I spent the first year expecting the cops to knock on my door and arrest me for what I had been accused of doing. I didn't land any jobs, I just lived off my saved money. I drank a lot and did oxy. I also grew resentful and violent. The only reason I didn't hurt anyone is that no one was around. My neighbor called the cops on me once after I had smashed a glass, but I managed to convince the officers that I had just dropped it, and they went away since there were no others inside my apartment. Instead of sleeping, I spent my nights planning how I could get revenge on Eve and make sure no one ever found out. I even thought about how I could actually do the things she had accused me of, but much worse. I know, I'm not proud of that. I landed my first real job in my field in late 2015. Only then did things start to improve. I focused all my time on my job, as it gave me something normal to do. Recovery was a slow process, but I drank less and smiled more. I lived cheaply and earned good money, so I made a point of buying myself a nice gift for my birthdays, a VR headset, a motorcycle, Lego, etc. And last year, I moved from my crappy apartment and bought a small house. It was an old dream of mine to have my own garage and a garden to care for. This has boosted me even more. So my life is okay now. I still have problems. I've been on antidepressants for the last few years, and while they help, it's not in a happy way. They simply remove the dark thoughts and replace them with dead ones. My trust in other people is close to non-existent. I've tried dating but have only been on 2 dates with 2 different women. It's really hard to speak like a normal person when it comes down to it. And what would I tell a potential partner when she asks about my family? Oh, you know, they accused me of a heinous crime, and we're not talking anymore. But I didn't do it, I swear. My field is very male-dominated, so the only woman I really speak to is my therapist, whom I like a lot. A few days ago, I received a text from my mother. It felt unreal, and I was scared to open it at first, so I just stared at the notification for hours before opening it. Yesterday, another text followed. Translated, they basically say, "Hi, my name. It's been so long since we talked. We miss you and want to know how you're doing." Here, she writes a long text about my sisters and how my nieces and nephews are getting big. I didn't even know I was an uncle. Know that we love you and always will. Love Mom and Dad. The second text said, "Hi, my name. We understand if you don't want to talk to us after what happened, but please listen. Last month, the subject of you was brought up at a family gathering. During this, Eve was downplaying everything that had happened to her. It got so awkward that she finally admitted that nothing happened and that she probably just dreamt it. We were all appalled by this. When we last spoke, we wanted to protect Eve and did the only thing we thought we could do. We know that's not excusing how you were treated. What Eve did was wrong, and we're all angry at her. We have called everyone that knew and told them the truth. We all want to speak with you, and your sisters want you to meet their families. Please write back if you can find it in you to forgive us. Love, Mom and Dad. So yeah, that's my situation right now. I haven't answered, but they no doubt know I've seen it. Truth be told, I'm seething. So many old, horrible memories are now stirring again. I don't want to forgive them, and I wouldn't trust myself to be in the same room as them right now. Part of me wants to call my family and unleash everything on them, to guilt them with everything I went through until they all hit their rock bottom. Then dedicate my life to making my cousin's life as miserable as possible. The other part wants to ignore them and continue with my okayish life with my motorcycle and my garden to keep me company. I don't have any friends. The only people I speak to are my coworkers, but we're not really close. I've called my therapist's clinic, but they told me she's on vacation and won't be available for weeks, and I don't want anyone else other than her. So that leaves internet strangers. Please, where to go from here? Do I ignore them and continue as is? Or do I answer? And if so, what to even write? I'm pretty sure meeting them in person would be a bad idea for the foreseeable future, but I'm not even sure how my life can improve from picking up those old threads. As embarrassing as it may sound, I've dreamed about the day when they apologize to me by throwing themselves to the ground and kissing my feet. Texting seems so anticlimactic now. Update 1. Hi, it's been a while since my last post, and I can't count the people asking me for an update. So I thought I'd post one, even though there's not much to say. First, I'd like to get a few things out of the way. Many people told me I should pursue legal action. I didn't mention this in my first post, but I decided against it long ago for a few reasons. In the best case, she would get a slap on the wrist, and I wouldn't gain much at all. I just don't think it's worth the legal headache. And if somehow I end up losing, I'll owe her legal costs. A lot of people have been messaging me about the fake updates. As I wrote in an edit to my other post, there are some fake updates on TikTok and YouTube. So if you saw something on other platforms that you didn't read here, then it wasn't by me. While I don't really care about people making fake updates, I just want everyone that saw my original post to know that these videos are not by me. With that cleared up, I'll add what's actually going on with my life right now. Know that I wrote the original post in anger and because I was completely lost on what to do. I needed a kick to the head, and I got that within the first couple of comments. That was really all I needed. I've met with my therapist. I was first scheduled for September, but she managed to move it, and we've had 2 talks so far. She also read the original post and many of your comments. While she would have preferred me to confide in a colleague of hers, in the end, she was glad you guys told me to calm down a bit and wait. She knows firsthand how I can get when angry. I won't go through everything we talked about, but it comes down to the fact that I may respond to my parents at some point, but if I do, it won't be anytime soon. I've started writing everything down that I want to say to my family, and then my therapist, and I will go through those things continuously. For those who asked, they haven't tried to contact me further. I will not be updating this issue anymore, nor will I be commenting unless it's something very important. I don't want to be rude, and I appreciate all the support, but it really is draining sometimes. I'd like to end by saying thanks again to all the people who've been wishing me well and checking up on me. And for the people writing to check that I'm still alive, don't worry. You don't have to do that. I'm off work for a while and not at the computer much. I'm busy painting my garage.
Imagine being at a young age, your life ahead of you, when suddenly your world crumbles. Your cousin accuses you of something unthinkable, something you never did. Your family turns their backs and you're left alone. Fast forward a decade, you've rebuilt, found strength, moved on. Then out of the blue, your phone lights up. It's them. The same people who abandoned you without a second thought. They want to talk, to reconnect. Drop your thoughts below and let's discuss the complexities of family, forgiveness, and moving forward after false accusations.
My wife passed away before she finished her first book, and when I tried to honor her memory by finding the draft, I found out she was writing to her affair partner and planning how to steal the kids away. So I, 46M, have been with my wife Cynthia, 44F, for 22 years, at least up until last month. Last month, Cynthia got caught up in a really bad car crash. She was always one of those drivers who loved to stare into her phone, and I should have done more to get her to change, but unfortunately, this distracting habit caught up to her in the last week of January. The police showed up at my doorstep and asked if this was her residence and if I was her husband. I said yes, and they gave me their condolences and informed me that Cynthia was caught up in a fatal car accident. I was crushed. We had 2 kids together, 18F and 16M, and we struggled to keep it together in the immediate days following her passing. I really wanted to honor her memory somehow, and at the time of the accident, I had no idea she was having an affair. I will say that in the last 4 or 5 months, I did notice she was pulling away and our intimacy decreased, but I thought this was just something that happened to couples after 20 years, so I didn't pay much mind to it. But anyway, at least from what she told me, Cynthia started to get into writing. She was constantly on her laptop, typing away at all hours. She told me she was working on a fantasy book, hopefully the first of a series. When I asked for more details, she said it was about a fantasy world where a super advanced human race appears and interacts with orcs and elves, incorporating magic alongside futuristic human tech. It sounded very cool, and Cynthia promised that as soon as she had a first draft she liked, she would let me read it. I decided to honor her by obtaining the draft of her book and hiring a writer to clean it up and publish it with a novelty press. I accessed her laptop, and there was no book. No sign at all. I opened her Chrome, thinking she might have written it in Google Drive and saw a bunch of pinned tabs. One was a Facebook Messenger tab, containing a ton of her messages with a man named John. I have no idea who John is, never met him, but they talked about meeting up, exchanged photos, everything. The last message John sent her was 2 days before Cynthia's accident, the two saying they loved each other, and him saying he was going on a business trip to Germany. The messages between Cynthia and John showed they had met up at the house more than once, so I already had the locks changed. Not sure if John is back yet, and frankly, I don't care if he is. I was thoroughly devastated. She did have a Google Drive tab, but in her drive wasn't a book about elves versus Vulcans, but a shared document with John. The document was a plan she and John drafted on how to divorce me, turn the kids against me, and take our home and as much money as possible. One thing she noted was she had been taking money, a few hundred a month, and putting it in a separate account. I got the bank thing sorted out, and I've also been going to therapy twice a week now. It is hard to be mad at someone who's no longer living, especially someone everyone else in your life is grieving and praising as a wonderful wife and mother. I have asked my therapist if I should tell my kids about what Cynthia has done and what she was planning to do. My therapist cautioned me about this. He said that they just lost their mother, and being told this would be condemning her memory, damnatio memoriae. Maybe now is not the time, but I think eventually would be a good time for my kids to know. Update 1. Some things have happened since last week. To answer some questions, I have gone to the bank and gained control of Cynthia's account, transferring the money into a savings account for the kids. Also, my kids already suspected. Tuesday night, my eldest said she and my son had something to tell me. They sat me down in the living room, and my daughter broke the silence saying, "We think mom was cheating on you." They both said they weren't sure, but it was eating them up seeing me in extreme grief over the past month, and they thought I should hear what they suspected. They brought up how Cynthia was always away, and when she was at home, she would make strange observations about me. Stuff like, "Isn't it weird your dad's working late this week?" As you might have guessed, this was one of those seeds Cynthia mentioned in her document that she wanted to plant in the kids. My daughter said her suspicions went high the week before the accident when she got home from school and saw a strange jacket on the coat hook by the front door. It wasn't any jacket my son or I had, so she was very suspicious about it. I told both my kids that I didn't tell them, but I found evidence on their mom's computer when I was looking for the book she said she was writing. My daughter wanted to see the evidence, but my son said he doesn't want to think or talk about mom for a while. I shared the info with her after she insisted she already suspected her mom and was ready for it. It feels good to now have someone close who can talk to me about this beyond my therapist. Yesterday afternoon, I was home alone when I heard someone jiggling the back door's knob. I went to the door and saw a man I had never seen before trying to use a key on the lock. I told him to step back from the door, and he almost jumped. I opened the door ajar and asked him who he was and what he was doing in my backyard. He introduced himself as John, Cynthia's business partner. He told me that he worked with my wife, and he just got back from a trip and saw Cynthia had passed away on social media. He mentioned that he and Cynthia were starting a business, and they had a business bank account with his investment money stuck there, and he was wondering if I could help him get the business funds transferred over. I looked him straight in the eye and said I had been to the bank, and Cynthia didn't have an extra business account, and I had no idea what he was talking about. John also mentioned that he wanted to check my wife's things for any sensitive business documents. I told him he was a stranger and wasn't welcome in my home, especially since he tried to enter without permission. John looked defeated but said he would consult with a lawyer about his sensitive business documents and business funds. So time will tell what happens.
A grieving husband discovers his late wife's unfinished book is actually a series of letters detailing her affair and plans to run away with her secret lover. This shocking revelation turns his world upside down. It's a powerful reminder that we never truly know what's happening behind closed doors. Have you ever experienced a moment where your reality shifted in an instant?